Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's nice to have you all here. Good morning to all of you who are with us over the internet. It's a bright, sunny day. It's nice, and it's good to have you all here, even though we could be outside enjoying a little bit of the sun. Today we're gonna have a lecture called "In Jesus' Arms: The Consoling Christ" by our friend Tiago. But before we start, as always, we're going to do our initial reading and our initial prayer by our friend Raquel.
Good morning. So I'm going to read from the book Happy Life. Contain your impulse, which arise from uncontrolled instincts, and act under the command of reason. It is true that good feelings can melt the ice of rational logic. However, it is often the case that the coldness of emotion or its aggressive madness require the vigilance of reason. Head and heart must act together, providing the advantage of balance and measure to create a healthy life. Listen with your feelings and act with your reason, keeping the two in just the right proportion. So let's now elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus and all the beloved spirit friends that are present here today with us. Let's ask them to open our mind and our heart to absorb as much as possible of the lecture today, that we may understand better what Jesus brings to us, helping us to become better humans, better spirits. Let's ask them to also bless our friends that were not able to come here, that somehow they may feel all the goodness that we feel in our hearts right now. Thank you. So be it.
Good morning. Very good to see everyone here again in this, summer Sunday. And it is very good to see everyone here, because every time that I come here, and many of you just mentioned, for so long we don't see each other, and it's hard for me to come here on a Sunday. But it's so great for me to come here, and I feel very happy when I'm driving. I keep thinking, my wife listens to me all the time. I go over the lecture with her while I'm driving. She knows about the lecture 2 or 3 times, because I changed 2 or 3 times while I'm coming here what I'm going to say. And there's a reason for that for me, and I hope that this happens with you too. During this month we are talking about one theme that we cannot stop talking about. We cannot stop going through that, and we cannot stop talking and thinking and feeling about it. Every time that I come across a theme like we're going to talk about Jesus, and for many people, that I talk to in my work, sometimes when I talk about Jesus, they consider this another article of a religious doctrine, a faith that is well established. For many are rituals that we go through, that we need to put in practice in order to have something in return. I'm not feeling okay, I go to a certain place, I say certain words, and then I feel better because of that. I feel guilty because I've done something wrong, and then I start looking at passages of a book and I start repeating them somehow, and with time I feel more comforted. And to be honest, I started like that too. There is nothing necessarily wrong with that. but more and more that we get in touch with the essence and the message of Jesus, and especially when we have an extra layer of comprehension of what the meaning of Jesus' teachings are, this gives us a different perspective and how we look at Jesus' teachings and how we understand what means to be in Jesus' arms. And hopefully during this few minutes that we have together, I can share with you about those feelings that I have. I've done that before, to think that when Jesus comes to save, we're talking about salvation or consolation. It is something that comes from outside us. I am responsible for doing something that makes me feel bad, and then suddenly, I am relying on an external source to help me, to give me what I need in order to rebalance what I have done, to give me a different feeling from my own actions. And slowly, and especially with the Spiritism, which is this layer, which in fact is that aspect of consolation that we have today to rely on, that actually opens our eyes and gives us a different perspective to make us understand that looking is an inward attitude. And we're talking about dialectics. I think we can talk a lot about, we're talking about affliction and we are talking about consolation, how we can combine those two and understand that they are actually, there is a huge intersection between what affliction and consolation is. What it is, the intersection between the pain that we go through and in fact the healing that we have for this pain. And actually they are not separate from each other. And hopefully I can make sense to you of everything that is going through here in my heart and my mind. But every time we go back to Him, we go back to Jesus. And the Spiritism helps us to give steps to be closer to Him, because we take away a little bit that allegory of His teachings that were proper for a certain time. And the Spiritism helps us to give steps to come closer to Him, to come closer to His teachings, therefore to come closer to ourselves. So we are talking about, the month of In Jesus' Arms. We're talking about Jesus' parables. And of course, in the book of Matthew, the chapter 5, that's what I consider the humankind's instruction manual. Even Gandhi, who was not a Christian, said that if nothing else existed to help us in this life, but the Beatitudes, that is called the Beatitudes, if this was the book left in the world for us to help ourselves, we would be okay. Because in my own understanding, out of all the teachings that Jesus gives us, the most effective element of consolation for our lives, and when I say that looking to the real afflictions that we go through, to many disappointments that we have in life, many times that we go home regretting a word that we said, I'm sorry, regretting that we said something to someone and we don't know what to do in order to mend that. When we go home understanding that our lives are not going in the way that we thought that they would go. When we don't expect, but we receive a phone call with very bad news. And we look around sometimes and we are by ourselves, or we believe that we are by ourselves. And then we start questioning, what are the reasons why all those things happen with us? Why so many difficulties that we go through? Many of us moved from one country to another to look for a better life. And then we come here, and some of the situations, some of the people, some of the relationships look so similar to what sometimes we thought that we were, getting away from. And something is coming back, as if it is coming back. And then we start thinking that we are in this loop. But we can make sense somehow of all of that. When Jesus comes to us and tells us that we are blessed for suffering. And then, of course, that it is fair that in the beginning we are going to look, are you kidding me? That's exactly what we are supposed not to be going through. It is the affliction. We are doing well in many ways. I come here and I learn and I read and I put in practice that and I smile to everyone. And still, so many things happen that are contrary to those expectations that I have that the things are going well finally. And then we start thinking, I haven't done anything wrong right now. Why is this still happening with me? Why is still that pain? Why am I still suffering? Why am I suffering if I am not the cause of all of that? Jesus, I believe he knew that we would also misunderstand that. For some, in fact, they say, well, if we are blessed for being afflicted, and right now I'm not suffering, then I am doing something wrong. If life to be worth needs to give us some sort of pain and affliction, and I am not suffering right now, should I put myself through certain voluntary afflictions even in order to be accepted? In order for God to please me? We go through a range of dilemmas, conflicts, questions every single day. And if we don't stop to think, and as the reading taught us right now, listening with the emotion, but acting with reason. Every single reading here has a meaning for us. And talking about consolation is a huge exercise for us. We listen to our lives through the ears of emotion. And the reactions that we have, why is this happening with me? My life is worthless. I can't handle this anymore. I don't handle this person that I am with, that I thought it was someone else when I met and I decided to be together with. Why? If for so many years this person that I'm raising, that today is my child, was so compliant, and today this person is giving me so much headache. Why? If I was so much calmer a couple of years ago, and then suddenly I explode at people. And I get back home and I keep wondering, why did I say that? Why did I do that? How did I react with that? So we have the years of emotion. But to make that leap, to act with the reason, they are here to help us. So then we are going to be able to help ourselves. Jesus knows very well that we suffer. He knew that when he prepared this entire place for us with every single element that is necessary for us to go through. Every single opportunity. I'm not talking about every single event, every single opportunity that we have to take lesson from the important events that we go through in our lives. Even though apparently they have nothing to teach us. And we think that we are right just to despise them and to put them away. But of course, that he also told us that we are blessed in suffering, but he also told us that we have the potential not only to overcome all of those afflictions and to even rejoice on them, but he told us that we are able to be a consoling message, a consoling mechanism, not only for ourselves but also for others. When we understand that we in fact are not here to suffer, the suffering today for us, those challenging events, they are inevitable. There is no way out of them. But when Jesus promised a new consoler, because he is the consoler, but when he promised a new one in order to help to unveil the meaning of his teachings, he knew as well that today we would have the opportunity to sit down, listen to our afflictions with our heart, but strive to put in action the reflections that we have with reason. Then he gave us the Spiritism, which in essence is Jesus' message, which are a legion of spirits and messengers and teachers for us that came under Jesus' direction to help us understanding that whenever we have that feeling that what have we done to go through that, then we would say, hey, remember one thing here. And that is the one thing that the Spiritism is helping us to understand. We are seeing life from a very narrow and shallow point of view. Our lives are much more than one existence. The events that we go through are a blink of an eye in relation to what the purpose of our lives are. When we suffer, we close ourselves, and the focus of our lives in that moment is the pain that we go through. And we somehow become enclosed in this specific feeling. And we lose temporarily the perspective that in the span of life that we have in this existence, and beyond what we have been so far, and beyond what we will become, because we will become, means that we must look at life from the point of view of the immortal spirit. This is one of the first steps for us to start changing the perspective of the meaning of everything that we go through in this life. When Jesus told Nicodemus that came in his aid, how can I achieve the kingdom of God? And Jesus tells him, if you are not born again, you cannot see the kingdom of heaven. And the Spiritism comes to us and says, one only existence is not enough for us to learn everything that we must learn, to put in practice everything that we are learning, to make sense of all the events that we go through in our lives, and to develop all the potential that we have. Because many times we do have that good feeling to say, I have that potential, and I get out of the door and say, I'm going to put this in practice. And many times we do. And we know that when we do it, there is an expansion. What the pain encloses. When we put in practice some of that potential that we have, something different happens with us. It feels that we are more than what we are. We feel that we break even some material barriers. And we feel that we can reach further. We have that feeling because our spirit is in action. Our spirit is acting. That's who we are. We are incarnated. We must fulfill the designs for this specific existence. Yes. We must go through the events that we are going through. And we must learn with them. Never losing sight. Remember, a couple of months ago, we were talking about trials and expiations. Every time that we go through an expiation, we look back. What have I done? We are recovering from something, from previous events or our previous actions. When we talk about trials, and we're not talking about something negative when we talk about trials. If we learn something in a book and we need to go for a test, this is a trial to put in practice what we have learned. What do we see? We see the future. When we go to school, we are looking beyond. I hope we are. I remember when I went to university, someone told me, hey, think about your last day, not your first. See beyond. Don't think about being a student. Think about being a professional. And that makes you go through all those sleepless nights with something in perspective. Now, when we go through events in our lives that are in essence painful, how many people we know sometimes we go visit them in the hospital? And we keep putting ourselves in their place. If I was here going through what they are going through, I have no idea what I was going to do. And suddenly they are the ones helping us to feel happier when we are in that situation. They are the ones that help us to feel more comforted. They give us the consolation that we need. Well, yes, that's true. It could have been worse. I'm recovering from something, that was very painful before. Maybe we didn't know that this person was going through so much more suffering than that specific moment that we were going to visit them. And then we look around and we change our perspective a little bit. And the Spiritism comes to us more than anything and anyone else, because the Spiritism is coming not from a horizontal point of view of our own limitations and imperfections and dilemmas and questions. They are coming from a source where the perspective is wider than what we have today. And it is a very interesting conception that many times is difficult for us to understand, is when we talk about affliction, when we talk about consolation, what Jesus would say, he would usually use that comparison, that scale, the poor and the rich. And here we are again, and many times I believe we have done that. We think about material misery and we talk about the material wealth or riches. And here it is another lesson for us. Again, Jesus has already taught us. Every time that we see life and we look for life and we look for satisfaction, consolation, fulfillment from the material, perishable, destructible point of view, that's what Jesus is calling rich. The excessive attachment that we have for everything that is not ours. including the people that are sitting down beside us. Nothing in that way belongs to us. Everything is a concession. We are being given opportunities, relationships, instruments, tools in order to progress spiritually. Because we will give account, and we need to put back in the toolbox that God gave us when we arrived here. That is a trial. That is a work that we are going to do. Each one of us has a toolbox. Like my friend Clay one day told me, the utility belt. Batman allegory here. The utility belt. All of us come for the tasks that we go through with a utility belt. And we have many tools to use. They don't belong to us. What does belong to us? The talent, the development of the capacity to use it. The accomplishment that we have is not because necessarily of the tool, it's because of how we are using those tools. Let's think about affliction. The spirits will tell us in the Gospel according to Spiritism. If you want to have a reference on that, chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5, blessed are the afflicted. Chapter 6, Christ the Consoler. Everything has been said. Everything is at hand for us. And the spirits will tell us the problem is not the affliction. And we will understand why the affliction is not a problem. In fact, it's much more than that. But the issue here is, how are we going through that affliction? What are we taking from that affliction? Are we being paralyzed because we are suffering? Or we are moving in different directions to avoid more suffering? And of course, the Spiritism will come to us, and Allan Kardec is very clear when he says, every effect has a cause. If the cause is not in this existence, will be in the previous one. Because we are seeing right now, inside the utility box, or this toolbox that we have, like to see the eclipse that we saw a couple of days ago, we need different glasses. We need a different set of lenses. Otherwise, we're going to burn our existence, suffering and not finding the meaning for it. When we see life and events and effects with the lenses that the Spiritism gives us, which is the lens of the immortal spirit. But that lens we came with. Those are our real eyes. Those we don't lose. When we open our eyes to see as an immortal spirit, we will understand that, one, it is not by chance that we're going through certain events of afflictions. And we don't need to know what we have done or what we have been in a previous existence. But we know through the tendencies that we have. We know through the way we react to someone that comes across us with a certain specific word, with a certain expression, with a certain attitude towards us, and we react violently, or we reject what some people say, or we have preference from one person to the other inside our own dwelling places. When we can't stand some people or place, when we don't want to hear some lessons that life is giving us through certain teachers that sometimes we think that we should be teaching them, but they become our teachers in the most unexpected situations. we know our tendencies, when we see that with the idea to lose something, I will lose my house, I'll lose my car, I'll lose my job, I will lose my status, my social position. If I make that change, I will lower myself, and in order to do that, like I am just not wanting to, in order to help someone, I feel bad because I need to give up from some things of my own comfort. Here we are, with our tendencies. When we have excessive attachment to earthly connections. There is a very interesting message that is called Training for Death, from the Spirit Humberto de Campos, psychographed by Chico Xavier. And as a journalist, he tells us news from the spiritual world, as if we are asking him, how can we act in this life in order to find ourselves in the spiritual world in a good way, in a good spot? And something that, talking to many people react when they read. Don't cling too much to the people that you have relation to, with your children, with your spouse. And the very interesting phrase that he gives us is love with moderation. And then we think, well, I can't imagine losing a person in my life. And that is very sensitive, because all of us have lost someone important. All of us went through the pain of saying goodbye to someone, and in that moment that seemed not to have an end, as if we will never see them. Sometimes we may have a regret. Yeah, I should have not said that word to them. I should not have been impatient to them in a moment that we knew that they were not doing okay. We go through these feelings or those thoughts. But here is the consolation for us. With the lens of the immortal spirit, we know that one, they never belonged to us. The relationship that is established with them are also concessions for us. And we are going to find a little more of consolation afterwards. Sorry to leave us in that place, but sometimes getting to ourselves in a place where we understand that this is a reality. I feel many times the perspective of losing something that I have, that I worked so hard to achieve, is not easy. And that is okay when we think that it's not easy. We are listening with our heart. What is important is to act with our reason. And the lack of acceptance of life events, of course. How many times we sit down and instead of praying at night, okay, I have a couple of questions right now, that is not thinking, that is not, praying for anyone, is I need to make some questions here. Why again this problem? Why again I'm going through this? Why I went for another job interview and they turned me away? Why I made that phone call for the person that I like and they just ignored me? Why I'm trying to be nice with people all around and the only thing that I receive is ingratitude? What am I doing wrong? All those feelings are a reflection of our lack of understanding of the meaning of the afflictions that we go through in our lives. This is very important. Many times we try to take shortcuts to the happiness that we are striving to find. And here we see something that today is very sad. How many times many people are going after the happiness and the bliss, using everything that they have at hand, even though I hurt other people or hurt themselves. How many times in order to be rich, I will steal from someone in my job. I will step on someone, lie to get a better position. How many times I get home and in order to be happy, I have at hand some substance, some medication, legal or illegal to the world point of view, that is going to give me temporarily some happiness or bliss, or erase temporarily some of the pain that I'm going through. We're not judging. We are understanding that we want to be happy. We want to be happy. It is fair that we want to be happy. What the Spiritism is telling us is we have the eternity to do that. It is not going to be necessarily tomorrow. And if you want this tomorrow, it's because you are impatient. If you want your problem to disappear in a week, you are in a hurry, my friend. So what are we tackling that moment? Our impatience. The search for happiness is actually tackling our unhappiness. And that's what I call dialectics. I found a place to talk about dialectics. The affliction and the consolation, the happiness and the unhappiness, they are all part of our same path of conduct. In order to be patient, what am I exposed to? To opportunities to be impatient. How do I know that I can let go of material possessions? When I have every single opportunity to be stingy and not to give away, because there is a need that is beyond me, and I can test how much I need. And that's what Jesus would say, that build a house in the sand. If I build my perennial happiness, if I want a perennial garden, we're talking about planting, then if we want a perennial garden, but we plant annual flowers, what are we getting? We go, put the seed, wait to germinate, do everything right. Next year, where is it? It's gone. But I planted, and I took care of it, and I invested. Well, we invested in what is perishable. There is a consolation on that as well. Every time that we invest, we know that we can invest. What are we investing on? Then we understand that the Spiritism is giving us elements to see all of those events and to look to ourselves and see all those tendencies that we have, and what are we going to do with them? First of all, we don't need to know what we have done. That is something called intuition from what is positive. That is something that is a tendency that can be positive or negative. From that, Allan Kardec would say, the spirits will say when Allan Kardec asks them, how we know what we need to fix in our lives? The spirits are very clear. Well, see how you act today. You don't need to go back. You don't need to go for, past life therapy or anything like that. Look to yourself today. Look to ourselves today. And the forgetfulness of the past, is one of the best elements for us to use our free will today and to exercise listening to our own conscience. Where do I want to go? It is not only about how I'm going to fix what I have done in the past. Remember, love erases a multitude of sins. Therefore, How can I today go through the events of my life and grant myself the ability to be happy tomorrow in doing the best that we can do today is already a huge element. Even though we are limited, even though we are not perfect, even though we don't have enough to give. The idea of obedience to God's designs, it's a lot of using our reason. Many times we don't feel that. But one thing that we can reason is every time that we act in a way that we regret, something is not okay. We don't feel good. And the resignation on the afflictions. Suffer well or suffer not well. We all suffer. How we suffer means, how am I changing my ways? If I am in a relationship that is causing pain, many times I need to look at how I'm relating. We're not talking about simply turning away and erasing the relationship. Otherwise, it's going to happen like we thought before. And I go through another relationship, and then suddenly something happens again, and it's the same kind of relationship with a different person. As if I am looking for the same person all the time, the same kind of person all the time. Well, what is that about then? It means that everyone is the same? No, it means that my attitude towards people is the same. And my attitude towards people is making me suffer. Is making me be unhappy in my relationships. Is that a way then, okay, I'm going to break up again and try to find another relationship? Or are we going to finally looking in the way, how are we relating with people? What do I expect from someone? What are my expectations? What do I want from this person that is with me? What do I want from this job that I'm looking for so long I can never stick with, because 1 week after I'm disappointed I move to another one. And I can never stick with anything. Exactly. I can never stick with anything. So let's think why. Patience. Remember, let's go back to the Beatitudes. If someone asks you to walk 1 mile, go another 2. How many times should we forgive the offenses? 7 times? No, 70 times 7. If someone asks you for your coat, give also the rest. It is all there. We know. And he's telling us that because he knows that is not easy. What is easy? To push away. And seeing everything from the standpoint of the Spirit. When we understand that probably in previous existence we had caused pain in certain relationships that we go through. Today we have someone in our lives or in our family that we have conflict with, a son or a daughter that we are always having headache. Someone that we are still having conflict, a sibling, a brother or a sister, that we clash constantly, but there we are together, and sometimes life events keep them together to us, right? We need to take care of a common parent. So we need to sit down all the time to define the next steps. And there they are together with us. Here we are. From the point of view of the Spirit, what is happening? We have no enemies as spirits. We make enemies here and there when they are not like us, when they don't agree with what we think, when they don't share the same perspective. But the enemy of today, and Jesus already told us, instead of going to your temples and give your sacrifice to try to please God, but if you have something against your brother or your neighbor, leave. Go reconcile with them. And then come back for your sacrifice. Here is Jesus again telling us the same thing. We have relationships in our lives that are very important for us. to practice forgiveness, to practice tolerance, to practice respect, to practice letting go of certain of their tendencies that are so different to us. So then we learn how to live with the diversity of ideas. Learn how to disagree without fighting. Understanding that others also have the same rights as you do, as I do. Someone may have a completely different idea, but not because of them they are wrong. Maybe they respect us more than we respect them. And the certainty of the future life. We know that what awaits for us, if we go through the afflictions of today, is the happiness of tomorrow. If we don't accumulate more debt with the divine justice, and we don't need to go through more trials and more expiations in the future, and we understand that what we are doing today is the perennial plantation for tomorrow's garden in our lives, then we understand where we want to go. And we find the resources to help us to understand what are the directions that are going to give me that happiness that I'm searching for, no matter how long does it take. And of course, the Spiritism that comes to us and says, we are immortal spirits, having lived in numerous existences, and bound to live many more until we reach the perfection that is allowed for us as God's creatures to reach. Whatever we could not accomplish today, we will accomplish tomorrow. And that's when we understand that the affliction of today is the consolation of tomorrow, is the prelude for happiness. Many times the affliction that we are going through today, that relationship that we are going through that is so difficult, is exactly the last straw. We are one step from reconciliation. Maybe the last existence of a conflict for tomorrow, finally opening ourselves. We may think this is never going to end. Maybe this is one step from ending, friends. We must remember that is the best incarnation that we are going through. That is the best one. And every single difficulty we go through, again, instead of seeing everything as a problem that we need to fix, how many times we say in our lives, oh my gosh, I think I was throwing stone at the cross, right? That's why this is happening with me. Because we all see those situations from that point of view. But when we think, well, yeah, it is true, I'm going through certain difficulty. Hopefully, during this existence, I still can one day wake up, sit down on the breakfast table with this person, and not be ticked off by a word that this person said. You know, not be that irritated because this person is late. Or not be that impatient when this person doesn't understand what I'm talking about. And then suddenly I will see from the other person's point of view as well that they are also tolerating me when I am too harsh. When they also respect me when I have a completely different idea and they let me do it. And I just think that is right. And they are actually respecting me not because I'm right, but because I have the right to have a different opinion. And then we can breathe a little bit and live a little bit differently. Come to me, all you who suffer. All of you who suffer. You know, I like to read that phrase as, come to me, all of you. He's looking at all of us indistinctively, rich, poor, good, bad, more or less, everything. Evolved, unevolved. Comma, who suffer? Comma. All of you who suffer, who are overburdened, and I will comfort you. And here is the interesting point for me, because again, from the beginning, I tend to see everything as I've done. But the answer for my problems will come from outside. When Jesus says, I will comfort you, he's saying this in the same way that he's saying we are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. You have a faith that if it is like a grain of mustard, you can move mountains. Jesus never took someone by the hand, stood them up, and held them and told anyone, here, they are standing up. They ask me, they ask you, they ask us, do you want to be saved? Yes, I want to be saved. Stand up and walk. There, he needed to prove concretely, materially, with evidence to those who were around him that he was able to do that. But every single time that someone was healed from a disease, what Jesus tell them? Your faith saved you. He never said, I saved you. Jesus is giving us the salvation, which means the opportunity to grow and to evolve and to progress, because he is sparkling in us that flame, that we are able to be the best that we can. We are able to overcome ourselves in the same way that he said, I have overcome the world. But we have the job to overcome ourselves. There are some conditions, and he was very clear on that. We are going to observe God's laws. And that observance here, it is not the observance of the Pharisees that he said, oh yeah, I know the laws. That observance is action, is practice, is the observing ourselves is as if we are or not following God's laws. And love and charity as a duty. It is a duty still for us, because we are bound by human justice, right? Human justice punishes what has been done. Human justice imposes some obligations on people. The divine laws love one another. Forgive the offenses. We know that we have that consolation, in fact, within us as well. Those lessons are reminding us the divine laws are within ourselves. Every time that we get in touch with them, this sparkles something within us. The Spiritism comes as the promised consoler to unveil the essence of Jesus' teachings. The Spiritism talks to us about allegories. Right? When Jesus tells us, if you're not born again, you won't see the kingdom of heaven. And then the Spiritism will come to us and says, we have the reincarnation as the most precious element for us that God gave us in order for us to progress. And to progress spiritually, spiritualize ourselves until the time that we reach the eternal happiness. There is a just and useful purpose for all pain. We know already what pain is physically, materially speaking. Unless, I don't judge, but I don't think people like putting their hands on the stove when it's on. The direction is instinctively opposite. We change our directions when there is a danger in front of us. Spiritually speaking, we are in process of development of our defense mechanisms that make us shift our conduct. When we are in some suffering situation, we are able to change. And that is our task. That is our way. We learn with the pain and the affliction that we go through in order not to repeat it and suffer again. We have the blessing of the expiation. The dialectical point of view is that one. What we are going through today is exactly a measure of justice from God that has built in two things: mercy and love. I just brought this book here that Teresa helped me to remember the stories from this book called And Life Goes On, written by the Spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. There is a drama. Well, this book is full of dramas. But dramas that represent a lot of what we go through in our lives. So that it is basically the story of Desiderio and Amancio. So Amancio loved Desiderio's wife. Because of that, Amancio kills Desiderio. There we have a murder for passion. Someone wanted to steal someone else's wife and kills them because of that. What would be our own point of view sometimes? Well, when Amancio discarnates, comes back in another existence, what's going to happen with him? Either someone is going to cheat on him with his wife, or he's going to die to repay the murder that he committed. It's not wrong to think like that until we discover that built in the divine justice has mercy and of love. Amancio is successful in marrying Desiderio's wife. He kills his rival, marries the woman that he loved. I would say that he loved, I don't know. But Desiderio, as a spirit that was murdered, comes back to their lives in order to recycle this relationship as their son. Was there any other murder? No. Was there any other crime? No. Is this relationship going to be easy? I don't think so. Is this son going to be an easy son? Have good grades, go to school, respect the parents, never going to steal the car, never going to steal the wallet? Probably will. But in the quality of a son, in order for us to learn how to love those whom we hated before. In order to give a life to those whom we took it in the past. Jesus said, it has been said, eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I tell you, however, forgive the offenses. Love your enemies. Today we know they were never enemies. There were roles that we played in previous existence that today we recycle and have different roles in each other's lives in order to finally love what we couldn't love before. Therefore, there is a purpose for our incarnation. If we see from this point of view, we will understand that they are right. God is perfect. Whatever God does is perfect. God's laws are perfect. So what are we complaining? Crisis and purification are two sides of the same coin. The unshakable faith is the element that will take us anywhere. That is the moment when the real afflictions come to us, when the inevitable pain comes to us. The only thing that will hold us is the unshakable faith. It's the faith that faces reason in all times, as Allan Kardec said. It is reasoning with the knowledge that we have today until they become natural for us. And what is one existence in relation to the eternity? Right? Thinking about the charity. Question 889 in the Spirit's book. Benevolence for each other's, with each other's imperfection. Indulgence for the faults of others. And the forgiveness of the offenses. The answer is already there. We talk a lot about charity. But the consolation that we have when we put them in practice is when we act like that. With ourselves and with others. And here we are. When Jesus talks about the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven in all his parables, he always makes comparisons and allegories, and he uses metaphors. The kingdom of God is like, the kingdom of heaven is like. He's saying is like. And always he gives us scenarios, characters, relationships. Because at the end, what he tells us in fact is, it cannot be observed outside this kingdom of heaven. Those are allegories that I'm giving you for 2,000 years. And I gave you the promised consoler. So then we will be consoled by Christ through his messengers that are unveiling the essence of his teachings. The kingdom of heaven and all the allegories that I've given you, this Jesus. It is the elements that we use in order to fit portions of our lives in those stories, because they represent the story of all of us. Because in fact, the kingdom of heaven, when we are able to put in practice the elements of consolation, going through the afflictions that we are going through, with the resignation and the patience, observing God's laws, Jesus is telling us that kingdom is going to be acquired, achieved by you coming from within. We are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. We can be perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. That is what Jesus is telling us for a long time. And when the Spiritism comes to us to help us to understand, it is because we are in a process of purification and spiritualization that is going to take an eternity and is going to lead us day by day, step by step, relationship by relationship, incarnation by incarnation, to the perfection that we are reaching for. Let's trust God, let's trust in ourselves, and we will be in Jesus' arms every single day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tiago. So do we have any questions? I think we have like a minute or so for questions or any comments. Anything from the internet, Marco? No? Nothing else? Okay, Tiago, thank you very much.
Thanks.
So let us all now get prepared for our passes. I was just going to ask the people, especially sitting against the wall there on the table, just to come forward so we don't have time for, have space for the passes. I just want to say thank you very much for everybody that was with us over the internet, and I hope to see you next week again.